Thanks for listening to Leadership Level Up. I'm Brian Prairie.
And I'm Dr. Jeff Williamson.
I am just starting my leadership journey.
And I've been guiding leaders for 30 years.
Our podcast aims to shine a spotlight on outstanding leaders and provide a platform for them to describe their leadership journey and share the guiding principles that have helped them become great leaders.
Welcome to Leadership Level Up. I'm your host, Jeff Williamson, for another episode where we talk about leadership and hear from leaders all over the country. It's good to have with us a friend. We were talking a while back. We've known each other now for 5 years. Unfortunately, the 3 or 4 days that we hung out 5 years ago, the last time we were together in person, but we've stayed in contact. And so when we started booking things for the podcast, I said, hey, we got to have Santor on. So let me tell you, if you haven't had a chance to listen to the first episode from a while back, let me just quickly give you some background on him. He is an accomplished author. He authored a book called Working with Gen Z, a handbook to recruit, retain, and reimagine the future workforce after COVID-19. We could probably talk the whole time about that. Also, he is the founder and CEO of Mulholland Consulting Group. He's a keynote speaker, corporate trainer. He's contributed to Entrepreneur Media, and he also hosts his own podcast called the Lineal Leader Podcast. So we're going to talk about that all here shortly, but welcome, Santor. Good to have you back with us again.
Thank you for having me back, Jeff. I appreciate it. It's always fun chatting with you.
Yeah, not everybody gets a second tour of duty, but you get another episode. So we're glad for that and for your time.
Appreciate it.
So I mentioned off the top your research and your work. I know you've got a couple of different writing projects that are in process, but the one that has been out now several months, got my copy and enjoyed that. Thanks for sending that along, by the way.
You got it.
Is Working with Gen Z. You've done extensive research with that age group and the workforce and what they need and what they are looking for in 2023. So tell us a little bit about the book, and then we can dig in a little bit deeper on some of your findings.
Sure, Jeff. So I've been working on this book. It's kind of funny. So I've been working on it since January of 2017. That's how long I've been studying Gen Z. Actually, they weren't supposed to be here until 2020, if you're looking at generations every 20 years. But I noticed the difference with my undergrad students. I don't know if you've seen that, Jeff, too, of them being a little bit more reserved. And I started getting requests for delayed assignments and due to anxiety. And I said, I think this is Gen Z's here, and they're here early. So I've been studying that since January of 17. I've been studying generations for over a decade. My dissertation in my doctorate program was on millennial work environment preferences. And now millennials, I guess, are old news. Gen Z,
seem young to me.
They're young, but everyone's talking about Gen Z now. So, and there's a lot of good books out there as well on the subject. But so we studied working Gen Zers when they were working in college and mainly in an office type of setting. And then we were 90% done, Jeff, with this book in March of 2020.
Then all of a sudden the world changed.
The world changed. So we said, you know what? Let's put this book on hold and let's kind of go back to the drawing board a little bit. And I said, I predict that the pandemic is going to change the future of work. And luckily I was right. It has. Much to the dismay of a lot of CEOs, but it has changed the future of work. So we waited, and then we did a national study of working Gen Zers to find out what did they want from their employers post-pandemic, and then how did the pandemic affect them while they were working from home. And it was really interesting to see a lot of stuff you would probably expect, which is it made them more anxious and depressed. The loneliness increased. We did find that they wanted a hybrid workplace. 3 out of 4 Gen Zers want to work remotely at least 50% of the time. And they want their employers to care about their well-being. Very important. And they want their leaders to be a mentor and a coach, not just someone who's an expert from a technical expert perspective or a delegator of tasks.
Sure. So I was thinking about from 2017 when you started looking at this age bracket, so to speak, and the workforce, to then shift to 2020 and the work you did since that time to really bring that forward is that has had an impact on what leaders need to know and understand, what leaders need to have at their skills, their disposal, their tools, whatever term you want to use.
Yeah.
So it shifted leadership too. And, how have some things shifted and changed in terms of what it requires of leaders now, post-pandemic, 2023, with the bundle of things that you just referenced that's a part of worker wellness and well-being?
Yeah, I think focusing on mental wellness, and really, I think Gen Z just has a less of a BS tolerance for crappy leadership. I'm gonna say, I didn't say the curse words to keep it clean.
Yeah,
but it's really true. I mean, I talked on our last episode about the volume with different generations, where maybe even millennials, we'll work for a crappy boss if we need to, and a lot of us have mortgages and daycare to pay for now. So okay. But that's what I love about Gen Z is they require more of the leaders. The volume is turned up more on that. So I think it's really important that leaders get professional development and understand them. We don't want to make the same mistake when millennials entered the workforce. And that's what inspired me, because I saw generational friction because they didn't understand millennials. And by the way, younger generations, we need to do a good job trying to understand older generations too. And that has suited me well in my career.
Well, thank you for saying that.
Not just to you, Jeff. Oh, wait, I am looking at you.
Just give me a little love. I appreciate that. Yeah,
let's give a shout out to Gen X, right? They never get any type of love.
Yeah, we need to be appreciative and compassionate to those who are older than we are. But anyway, yeah. So yeah, I think in a previous conversation we talked about that. I think the younger generation in the workforce now are not so much asking for things that have never been wanted before. They're just willing to say the things that us in our 40s, 50s, and 60s even were like, yeah, that matters to me too. I just was either afraid to say that was important or that I needed that or even that I deserved that. Where now the generation will say, listen, I can't serve you well if I am in a mental health crisis. So you need to help me with that so that I can keep this balance of wellness and all the kind of things that go into that. And that is a compliment to say you're willing to ask for things we've all needed for a long time, but just haven't had the courage to voice it.
Well, and Jeff too, I think that we all need to show up and do our best as well. I mentioned this in the last one, where if we have mental health challenges, that we need to go speak to someone. And that's one thing I've been talking to companies is I've toured all over the United States this year promoting my book. And when I've talked to a lot of HR leaders, I said, does your insurance or EOP, does it cover therapy? They're like, yeah. I'm like, you need to start telling everyone. I mean, that should be the number one recruiting tool to say, because I mean, Jeff, you're a professor. So on college campuses, we usually have a student health center where they have access to counselors that's covered as part of your tuition. What happens when they graduate and don't get access to that anymore?
That's a great point. All of a sudden I'm 21, 22, and there's not a health center that I can go to between lunch and my afternoon meeting. And that's a great point. I think we just kind of fall off that cliff of where are my resources?
But a lot of companies offer that, Jeff, but it's so complicated. When I don't know if you remember your first day, and now we're trying to do this virtually in some cases. Do you remember your first day of work when you're in your 20s and they probably handed you a thick stack of papers to fill out and you're like, I don't know like what's included or not, because if maybe this is the first time on your health plan. So as HR professionals, if anyone's listening there, making sure that we make it easy to understand and accessible. And the leaders, if you're vulnerable enough to talk about, hey, I talked to a lot of Gen Xers throughout this pandemic and said, hey, therapy saved me from depression and other types of things. So being vulnerable to talk about it. It's a fine line though, because from a legal perspective.
Right. Absolutely. But I think that's one of the keys that we're coming out of, the 2020 and 2021 experience is that wellness is more than just what's my blood pressure and what's my cholesterol count, and paying attention to those kinds of things and affirming the reality that impacts our work, that impacts our mindset to lead, because leaders can have that as well, that maybe they're not in a good space. They're maybe having struggles,
Leaders statistically, Jeff, I can't remember where it was, but I read that leaders are more stressed out than individual contributors because of everything that they take on. And the good leaders are the ones that really are stressed out because they care so much about their team. Right. But we want to make sure that they take care of themselves too, because we can't help others unless we put our mask on first. Oxygen mask.
That's a great point. You mentioned that because as I'm sure you see too, as you work with leaders, I mean, at times where I've been coaching a senior leader or CEO, one of the first things that often comes up is, gosh, I don't have anybody else to talk about this stuff with. It's so helpful to have a trusted professional advisor who understands business, who understands organizations, but that I can think out loud in a safe space. I'm not a mental health professional, but I am an executive coach. And so I often, that old saying that leadership can be really lonely. And I think that's become even more evident in the last couple of 3 years as
working from home.
Yeah. Leaders are working all over the place. Your team's all over the place. They have significant needs. You're processing stress as a leader, trying to keep your team together, keep them on task. And how do I do that when I have my own issues that I'm working with, right? So,
Jeff, a lot of it is self-regulation too. How much of, and I ask this a lot when I go out and talk to clients and do workshops, and I say, how much of your stress is self-imposed? Or versus external? How much of it is internal? And we've been there, Jeff. I've been there. I'm fortunate enough where my wife does have a business background, and we met in business school. So I talk to her all the time, and she actually helps me run our company. So I'm fortunate and I have a partner right at home that we could talk about these type of things.
Man, you're a lucky dude. So you married a highly qualified executive coach who you happen to fall in love with. That's a great combo.
Not an executive coach, but an MBA grad.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like she's coaching you up at times.
Oh, she is. Yeah, that sounds about right.
Yeah, I'll leave it there though. I won't go down that trail.
She's an analytics person too.
Yeah, that's perfect, man. You got
a
match made in heaven. Woo and analytics under the same roof.
That's right. Restorative, deliberative, all the things that I'm not. But we don't have empathy as a couple, so unfortunately.
Yeah. Well, as a saying, you got to go rent somebody that has that in their top strength set so they can speak into your journey and that kind of thing.
I think one of our kids do, though, but I think I use communication for my empathy. And by the way, for people who are not familiar with strengths, doesn't mean I don't have empathy. I mean, as a top strength, as a top Gallup strength.
You're not top, may not be 5 or 6.
I'm very empathetic, but it's not like I could feel how other people feel. I have to ask questions and put myself in their shoes. So,
and that's a good illustration too, because as we're talking about strengths and how we lead and get information, I'm similar. Learner has always been in my top 5. And so I love to seek out information and to ask questions and those kind of things. And like you were saying, I'm not proud that empathy's not in my top 10 or 15, but
31.
Well, we're living in a similar neighborhood, but you make a great point. Whereas like we do have empathy. We just have to be more intentional about how we access that. So for me, it's asking questions, what is it like when that happens? How do you feel when that happens, or when this scenario comes up? Tell me more about that. So that learner in me is able to kind of fill the gap, if you will, of information or things that I won't necessarily just sense automatically, but that I can get that information in a good way to help understand where you're coming from. That was a great illustration. I like that.
Well, and Jeff, mine is really communication. That's how I use it. Like, tell me a story. Like, tell me why you feel this way. So then I grasp onto the story, right? And then that energizes me to help me picture it a little bit better.
It does. And even in the coaching space, I'm constantly asking people questions. And when I start working with them, I'll say, hey, I'm going to ask you a lot of questions. And it's not because I'm questioning you.
What do you mean?
Yeah. Well, you're asking me a lot of questions. That makes me feel defensive. I'm like, time out. That's not where we're going here. It's learning for me. It's information. Yeah. It's, as you said, it's understanding your story so that I can have a better grasp on how it can serve you well. Because I know you better and I understand where you're coming from, even though we're very different people. So yeah. I'm glad we've drifted into talking about strengths because
it's always fun.
It's always at the heart of everything I do. I think.
Me too. Me too.
Yeah. Very cool. So you mentioned recently that you have a couple of other book projects that are in the coming days. Besides the one that you've finished recently that we've talked about. Catch us up if I know you can't tell us the whole scoop because they're still coming, but tell us about some of the focus that you're looking at, some of the themes that you're exploring and researching on those upcoming projects.
Sure, Jeff. And one of them is mental health in the workplace or the post-pandemic world, where a lot of us, the pandemic's over. Right. Officially, I think. So it's like sometime this year they announced that. So does everything just go back to normal? We just flip a switch? I don't think so. Right. I think a lot of people have PTSD. I mean, some of the behavior I've seen in public, Jeff, have you seen that of just how people manage themselves? I mean, we see it on these airline TikTok videos of. So I think a lot of people are struggling. So that's where I'm teaming up with a psychiatrist and a clinical psychologist to really dig in on what leaders can do to help support their Gen Z and all generations of workers and what workers can do to help bring their best selves to work. So we're working on that. Really excited for that project. And then I've been working on this other project since we've talked, Jeff. I put it on hold because of the pandemic because I wanted to see the impact, but I'm writing a how-to guide for first-time and emerging leaders. And I've already interviewed over 100 millennial leaders. And I think like 20 of them won Forbes 30 under 30, which is a really prestigious award. So those are the two book projects I'm working on right now. And then TEDx is in the works as well.
Yeah, I know you do a lot of speaking and training and interacting with clients all over the place. We were talking before the call about like, hey man, next time you're in the Chicago area, let's make it happen, right? Because you're not always in our area, but so I know you get around all over the place doing your work and promoting the book that did come out a few months back. So as far as, can you give us a little snippet on the potential TED Talk as to what your general theme might be, or is that like highly under wraps?
I think it might be under wraps, but it's gonna be about leadership.
Yeah, I thought you might not be able to spill the beans on that completely, but we'll have to watch for that and see when that exciting thing happens. That would be cool for sure.
Definitely.
Yeah. So one of the things that I always want to do, especially when we have a guest who's an author, has a lot of good material out there that can help other people, is I wanted to shamelessly allow you to give a pitch for your website, where they can get your book, how they can reach out to your company and contact you if they're interested in learning more or perhaps working with you and your team.
Sure. Well, my website is drsantor.com. So drsantor.com. I have actually a lot of resources there on the articles I've written. Also, a lot of my recommended books. So Jeff, as a learner, I always send that link to my learners when I do workshops to say, here's a whole bunch of books I recommend. My contact information is on my website. Also, my podcast is available on my website or Apple or Spotify. And my book is available on Amazon. We actually did an audiobook for the people who don't like to read. I have some of my friends and even some clients that said, I'm more of an audible type of person. I don't like reading books as much because I have a longer commute. So that's why we did an audible for those type folks. Yeah. So, and we hit #1 bestseller on Amazon, which was really exciting. Yeah, it's definitely been a goal of mine in 3 different categories. So that was a good highlight of this year. Yeah. So, and feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Santor and I have been friends for about 5 years, and I promise you're going to enjoy any interactions you can have with him, whether it's a live event or chatting or just following along his content. You will enjoy the journey. So, hey man, thanks so much for coming on with us. It's as you know, it's a joy to always talk to you and stay connected. Appreciate your insights, proud of the work you've done and continue to do. So thanks again for sharing that with us. I'm sure our listeners are going to really, really find a lot of value in that.
Well, thank you, Jeff. And you're, a great human being. I appreciate all the work you do. And it all comes from a positive place, which is why I felt like you and I really connected at that conference.
Absolutely.
And thank you everyone else for listening. I really appreciate it and hope this has helped at least one nugget to help you on your leadership journey.
Thanks so much. Great to be with you.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Leadership Level Up. Please subscribe so you don't miss future conversations with great leaders.